I don't see it. As far as the receiving core, this team has invested in the receiving core over the years, drafting a Sky Moore. They signed Juju Smith, let him go, signed MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's now gone. Traded for Kadarius Toney. He was a dud. And then last year, finally, something went right for this Chiefs offense receiver-wise. Rashee Rice came about. And then this offseason, they decided to draft a receiver in Xavier Worthy, and then also signed Hollywood Brown, who I want to talk about right now. Hollywood Brown is kind of a curious case because he's an analytics godsend. Everybody loves his ability to get open. There's potential with him, and on a per game match, all the stats and analytics say Hollywood Brown should be better than what he is, but he's not good fantasy-wise. And I think this is a player I've kind of been hard on Hollywood Brown over the years because the expectation in the bar has been crazy high for a player who at times looks good, but then he disappears for some games. Last year in 14 games with the Cardinals, he had 578 yards and 4 touchdowns. Doesn't offer a lot of receptions upside, doesn't offer a lot of touchdown upside. Even with Mahomes, there's a little bit yardage-wise that we can see some upside potentially, but he's now played with Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and now it will be Patrick Mahomes in a contract year for him. In his career, he's only had one season over 800 yards. One. And only one season over 70 catches. So unless something drastic happens with Hollywood Brown and he just becomes a whole different player here at the middle of the prime of his career, I kind of think we're still paying for this nickname Hollywood Brown and the analytics side of what we think he can provide. So I think in real football, he'll be a good piece for this offense, an additional receiver that can get open, but it's still going to be led by Travis Kelce. Hollywood Brown's going to be a complementary piece. Kind of think what Juju was in this offense. He's a complementary piece, not a main focus. All right, that's what I think about Hollywood Brown. Don't draft him just because we see Kansas City. We know what Tyreek Hill was. We see Patrick Mahomes and just think that Hollywood Brown's going to become a completely different player. I think he's a good player and will produce good results, but don't draft him because of the Patrick Mahomes attachment, okay? You still want to see, we've done that over the years now. Juju, we did it with Rashee Rice. It worked out last year. Rashee Rice in the second half. Sky Moore was taken really early, so just be cautious when it comes to automatically assuming Kadarius Toney. I did the same thing with Kadarius Toney. Be careful when automatically assuming the Patrick Mahomes effect is going to make your receiver, an instant fantasy star. It's not seeming to work like that. It's actually missing more than it's hitting. The player did hit with Rashee Rice last season, and this is probably the most controversial of the receivers. His status is still up in the air. Obviously had some offseason trouble, had a hit and run incident that was very well documented. Also hit a photographer at a nightclub allegedly. So there's a couple of incidences that have happened with him over this offseason that will affect his fantasy stock. As of right now, as of this recording, we have no clue what a suspension looks like for him if he's going to be suspended for this season. We have to assume something is coming just because of his offseason troubles. I mean, we know the NFL don't take too kindly for that. So two different things that he has to deal with already this offseason. It's probably not looking good. If you're asking for my humble opinion, I don't know what's going to happen at all. I don't have any inside intellect. I don't even have a really good guess. I would say somewhere around the 6 to 8 game marker sounds about right. We've seen domestic violence stuff go about 3 to 6 games. We've seen other drunk driving stuff go about 4 games. We've seen the gambling stuff that's been like a year for some players. So there's all different variations of where this can go. But for Rashee Rice, I'd expect, especially with multiple incidences, somewhere in that 6 to 8 game marker. I'd be surprised if it was longer than 8 games. But I'm not the commissioner. The commissioner will set the precedent. But when Rashee Rice did play, he was the wide receiver 27, 79 catches, 938 yards, 7 touchdowns. He actually had six straight double-digit games down the stretch. And, for everything that this team has been looking for, it's like that was what Rashee Rice was expected to do this offseason and become as this team's featured receiver and potentially take some of the workload off of Travis Kelce. Unfortunately for him, he did get in trouble. So The team did bring in Hollywood Brown, also drafted first round receiver Xavier Worthy. This is a player now who we have to be cautious with drafting, especially when we don't know what the suspension looks like when and if it happens. So uh to me, I'm out on Rashee Rice this year. Even if he comes back in the middle of the season, it's going to take some time for him to get ramped up. I'm sure he'll have a couple decent games down the stretch, even if he does play. But this will be more of a fantasy playoffs type move if you can get a lot of value on him. Otherwise, I'd be out depending on the cost. If you have to pay top 30 to 35 prices for a player that's going to be out for a significant amount of time, I don't think it's worth it. Now, I know in the fantasy playoffs, he'll be very helpful if he comes back, but we have to get to that point and see if he's even available, okay? First round pick, Xavier Worthy. The team traded up for him with the Buffalo Bills, who helped the Chiefs yet again. Traded up for him in the first round. 4.21 speed, crazy athleticism, huge vertical jump. But the size is a concern. He's 5'11", only 165 pounds. So initially, I think this will be very similar to what the team did with Tyreek Hill and put him at returner in the kick game and the punt return game. I think he'll provide some value there immediately. I think he'll also have a decent impact in the passing game for this Kansas City Chiefs teams, taking some deep shots downfield and creating electric plays from the line of scrimmage. But I think it's going to take time. And we talked about Hollywood Brown already. We've talked about Rashee Rice. We talked about Travis Kelce. We talked about the run game with Pacheco. Consistency might be the issue we see with Worthy until he proves himself as an NFL receiver. I think we have to pump the brakes on a year one mega breakout for Worthy. Would it surprise me if he had 1,100 yards this year? Wouldn't surprise me. I'm just not betting on it this year. I think we have to wait a season to see that with the other weapons that are on this team. But if his speed is real and he does have a connection with Mahomes, things can get very interesting very quick. It's a player I think is more upside, but has a really low floor. And I have a feeling he's going to be on waivers more often than he's going to be on rosters this season. But a good upside piece. I'm sure he'll have a couple games that make us question everything, some big games out of Xavier Worthy. But my initial hunch and kind of my direction with him would be to wait on him until the later rounds. If you happen to have one of the later picks in the draft and he's available, go ahead. Let's see how ADP shakes out. I'm assuming he plays the third or fourth passing game option in this offense come year one. Year two, year three will be very exciting if he picks things up, though. So that's, even if we get Tyreek Hill, the light version, I'd be very happy with that. All right, and then when it comes to Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, obviously these guys are not a big part of the passing game. Sky Moore would have a lot to prove to become a part of this. He's had opportunity, hasn't made the most of it. Same thing with Kadarius Toney. They traded for him, and there's, Andy Reid's talked up his role and said they have a plan for Kadarius Toney. Got to catch the football and got to make plays. So I'm out on Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and redraft. Unless we see something this offseason that says they're going to have a more prominent role, I would steer away from them, even though they're tied to Patrick Mahomes. All right.